Aloha, my name is Roma Lerner, and welcome to HIFF Talks, the official podcast of Hawaii International Film Festival. I am currently a student at Colgate University, and this summer I am interning with HIFF. Through this next set of episodes, myself and the other interns will be interviewing film industry professionals from Hawaii to learn about their experiences in the industry, as well as any advice they have for up-and-coming filmmakers and creative. In this episode, local filmmaker Bryson Chun tells us a little bit about his experiences in the film industry, as well as his favorite lunch from Kamehameha schools. He has been featured on projects such as Disney's DOOGIE KAMEALOHA MD, as well as more recently, MOANA 2. Let's dive into it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna formally start now, but
We're in it.
we're in it. Thank you so much, Bryson, for
I'm
coming
stoked
out
to be here. Thank you
all the
for
way from
having me.
Kahaluu
Yes.
with traffic. But first of all, we're talking about Kamehameha.
Yes.
We're both warriors.
Yes.
But I guess just first of all, how was Akahi for you when you were there?
You know, it was good. Okay, here's the thing. I love the food, right?
Yeah.
You have to love the food when you see what other schools have.
Yep.
You have to be grateful.
Yep.
But also, I know I have friends or family that graduated in the 90s.
Yep.
And they used to have pizza and burgers every day.
Really?
Yeah, see, so we had healthier food, which
Yeah.
is great in theory,
Mhm.
but as a young person, I'd much rather have pizza every day.
Pizza and burgers, yeah?
Yeah, every day. But what was your favorite Akahi thing?
You
I have a weird
see-
one.
No, I feel like mine's weird too.
What is your weird one?
The shepherd's pie.
Okay, see, that is a weird one. I agree. Mine is
Okay.
similarly weird. I liked turkey a la king.
We don't have that.
Okay, see, but it was not a good lunch, but I really liked it.
So
It
no
was
one else liked it except for
No,
you?
I was the only one.
Okay.
It was it was clearly canned turkey because the turkey was
Yeah.
cubes, which it shouldn't. No turkey is ever served in cube form.
Yep.
They were little cubes with just gravy and mushrooms, but it was
Yeah.
really good. I don't know, but
Did
no
you
one
guys-
likes that.
Did you guys still have the ramen and the
We've never
sushi?
had ramen or sushi. You had ramen and sushi?
we had ramen
That
a
makes no
sushi
sense to me.
thing.
Why do you have ramen? That seems so expensive.
I don't
for
know.
us
It
to
was
have.
just some extra. I think they were just really. I think they got carried away with one special item.
Okay.
And they decided to do 5.
Wait, that's crazy though.
Yep.
I mean, the best thing we had was sometimes we had kalbi, short rib,
We
but it was
never had
once
that.
a year.
Oh yeah.
They called it a warrior plate or something.
Oh,
We had it
really?
once a year, and then they got rid of it because it was too expensive. But it was incredible.
No, we never had that.
But we never had sushi, and
And
ramen
ramen.
sounds incredible. Was
Yeah.
it good?
Yeah.
Okay,
It
see
was
that's
super
not fair.
good.
See, I
Yeah.
feel I was in a window where I feel our food wasn't that good.
You were
It was
having
okay.
canned turkey. Yeah.
Right, I was having canned turkey that was shaped like a cube. so
Got it.
that's,
Got it.
You know.
Got it. Okay. Well, getting more into the nitty gritty things.
Sure.
At Kamehameha, did you have any sort of courses or any professors that sort of led you into thinking about maybe joining the film industry? I know you mentioned
Yeah.
you were theater when you were younger.
Yes.
Did any of those classes sort of push
For
you?
sure,
Yeah, yeah.
sure. I think, there were film classes back then, but it was way more rudimentary than it is now. And
Yeah.
and I didn't even take those classes. I think where I really was pushed toward film was actually through writing classes.
Yep.
And I wrote for the paper back then with Mr. Barona, who's still there, who was amazing. Just somebody who was really encouraging of me as a writer and as doing creative stuff.
Yep.
And it was his first year managing the paper, and he ended up making me by mistake. They shouldn't have given me responsibility, but I was the editor for the arts and entertainment section because they just knew I loved movies and
Yep.
stuff. So it was okay, I get to just talk about movies and TV shows all the time. And so that was a fun, way to get into writing. I was also taking creative writing classes, which I think weren't super big at the time, but there was a teacher there back then, Wendy Burbridge, who was just a really cool, a creative writing teacher. So she was cool and different and kind of weird and was just this emo teacher, and it was fun. Just writing weird stuff, and I was reading a ton of Chuck Palahniuk books because I was an angsty teen kid,
Got it. Yep.
boy books, and just constantly writing. And I think those were kind of teachers for me that put it in my mind that, hey, maybe you could be a writer. And so that was really like kind of an awakening for me. And then definitely theater. I mean, Pat Fujioka, who's still the director out there, huge influence for me in terms of just like, I think prior to doing theater and stuff, like I would have felt so nervous just talking on something like this. But, I think, that experience and just getting into acting a little bit, which I'm not very good at, but it was fun to do. And, being involved in those productions, I think it was the combination of all of those things that felt like, okay, film feels like an evolution of all of these things. So yeah, definitely. I think my time at Kamehameha was in particular that people were supporting performing arts. And so it felt like, okay, this is something I could do and excel at. And, I definitely spent more time focusing on that than school. So I think, it was fun, but I definitely didn't get good grades, but it was an okay time.
It's okay, as long as you had
no
fun,
judgment.
yeah.
We listen and yeah, exactly.
No, that's super awesome. And I know Kamehameha is all about the performing arts, but like sometimes you don't realize like, oh, it doesn't mean like only ensemble and singing and dancing hula. Like it's also cool to find those classes. Like I took a creative camera course, and then they also had like, it was like film, global cinema, something like that. But yeah, just
That's
those
so
like
cool
theory classes that were super fun. But like I think sometimes you think it has to be like performative or like theater or something like that, but it's awesome to hear that your writing classes like also shaped that for you.
Did you know you wanted to be a filmmaker before you got to high school, or was it something you discovered there?
That's a good question.
Or even after?
I think that I dabbled in a couple of film courses because it was something that was always interesting to me, but I'd never thought that I would like pursue it as a major in college or anything like that. And then once I got to school, it was college. I go to Colgate. It's in like upstate New York, but that was when I really started to like take a couple more classes to just explore, but I had like great professors. And then I was like, you know what, maybe I'll hop fully into this. But yeah, awesome. So it definitely was like in my mind in high school, but not fully something that I had committed to. But yeah, it was still cool that I got to take those classes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like those kinds of classes, I feel like they're being offered more and more now at that age. And I feel like you need that. You need to be introduced to something, even if you don't pursue it fully. Like even just learning about that stuff is super, I think it's, it's eye-opening for a lot of students. And like, I'm lucky I get to do through HIFF or through different opportunities like school visits, just showing someone like, hey, this is something you can do as a career is very like eye-opening. Even if just one kid is like, oh, that's interesting, and maybe I'll think about it. It's awesome.
Nice. And then like more, I guess, out of the blue question, but like aside from courses, was there any sort of like film or movie that really struck you when you were younger that sort of inspired you like, oh, maybe filmmaking is kind of cool, or like you wanted to look more into it?
Question.
Don't think too deep. I know this is a tough question.
I think, at different phases in my life, like as a kid, I grew up at the time of those, when Star Wars came out again, they re-released them. And it was something I think that it was my like, introduction to what I think a movie could be. Yeah. Just seeing something massive. And I mean, it was a phenomenon again, right? They just re-released them with worse effects, and but we loved it. We ate it up. And, that was something just as a kid, I think awakened something as a storyteller in me. Like I was reading all the books and starting to write like my own little stories about it, just being like a fourth grader and loving it. And then I think really like eye-opening movies for me, like in high school, college, was like Garden State and like Juno a few years later were movies that I think I saw them and I was like, oh, you can make things that are so uniquely you. Yeah. And I think that's very freeing to think, okay, it doesn't have to be this big universal blockbuster thing. Like you can tell very intimate stories that of people that talk like you or act like you. So yeah, I think maybe I'm like every millennial has those as like touch points, but
Yeah.
like, you know, Garden State and Juno were just huge movies for me. I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
And do you think that as you started, like, you know, your first projects, whether that be, you know, your script for Poi Dogs or things like
Yeah.
that, do you think that that sort of reflected into your scripts or into the things that you wrote because
Yeah.
you were so inspired by them? Or do you think you sort of took your own creative control over those projects?
That's such a great question. I think, you know, you're always kind of carrying the DNA of the things that inspired you.
Yeah.
And I think, but you know, part of that is the shows you watched and the books you read and your friends, right? So there's always like a melding of you know, life experience, but also just the voice of the things you love. And so, yeah, definitely. I think, you know, telling stories about this place in particular, about Hawaii, like once I started, I think I actively, when I was first starting, I tried to not do that. I think you just assume, oh, no one's going to care. But I think once I started leaning in and telling stories about Hawaii and kind of writing about people that I recognized, but then brought, you know, those types of voices like, you know, in Juno or whatever, it started to feel like my own voice, you know, my own thing. It was a melding of all the things I kind of loved. So
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's really funny to hear, because I know like us interns, we talked about a few weeks ago, like that movie that made us really like get into film.
Oh yeah,
or
what's
something
yours?
Like that.
Because I'm gonna judge you. It's like,
I said My Cousin Vinny.
oh, okay, amazing movie.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, I love that movie. It's so funny.
No, it's so funny. And the end scene with Marissa Tomei is
Yes.
just like perfect.
Yeah, she's incredible.
Yeah, but it was just like funny because we all said totally different movies.
Yeah.
And they were like so different, but it's like awesome to see how that sort of shaped our interest
It's so cool.
in film like that. But yeah.
I noticed this about, I'm like totally casting a wide, I mean, I'm just like, this is a generalization about people your age, but I noticed so many of your influences are like much older.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that is something, did you feel like that's like across the board? Does everyone like older movies, or do you feel like you are in particular liking that?
Yeah,
I'm curious.
No, that's a good question.
I see that a lot. Like I hear when I'm doing like mentorship stuff with like high school people, like they'll name movies that are really old. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of like shocked by that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like a lot of people these days that are my age definitely do like to lean a little more towards those older, maybe like 80s, 90s,
Yeah.
2000s, I guess. I don't know, maybe in like romanticization thing.
I know. I wonder if it is.
But yeah, I mean, personally, I grew up, my parents made me watch like every film from the 80s to the
Okay,
90s.
you have
So
good
that
parents.
was always,
That's what
thank
it
you.
is.
But that was
Yes.
always like a preference for me. I
Yes,
think that
okay.
those were always films that I personally enjoyed just because that's what I grew up on.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
do see how it's more, it's like circulating more.
Yeah,
with
like
that.
I'm mentoring a kid who's like, he is like 15 years old. So he's quite young.
Yeah.
And he's like watching all the David Lynch movies right now. And he has a letterboxd and everything. So I have
Okay.
to.
He's in, yeah.
Yes. He when I first met him, it was super funny. He's like, yeah, you know, my name is so and so. I don't want to like dox him. And then he's like, yeah, and I've got like 1,100 movies on Letterboxd. And I was
Oh,
like, it was like one of the
okay.
things. I was
He
like,
was flexing,
Yeah,
yeah.
like a flex. I'm like,
Yep.
incredible. Okay, good for you. But I mean, look, for a 15-year-old, that's incredible. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
No,
awesome.
and that's awesome. Yeah, it's super interesting to see what kind of films people like these
For
days.
sure. For sure.
But I think, yeah, I agree with you. I feel like they've
Yeah.
been circulating more often.
But I love that.
But yeah, and then now into more like your personal projects, things like that. I was just curious if you found it more, not more difficult, I guess, but just like, how do you think your role as a Native Hawaiian, you know, writer, producer, director, does that make it a little more difficult in the industry compared to someone who maybe isn't Indigenous, like for your projects to sort of, you know, gain traction
Yeah.
or to find work, things like that? But like, how does your role
Yeah.
as a Native Hawaiian filmmaker really play out?
For sure. I mean, yeah, definitely. It's hard. I think, you know, there's always going to be an interest, and there has been, I
Yeah.
mean, historically in Hollywood, for stories about this place. But they don't always want to hear it from, you know, people from here. Sorry, it looks like I'm crying, but I'm not. But, you know, it's interesting. It's like there's always this sort of disconnect between the place and the people who live here.
Yeah.
I mean, in you know, in industry terms, and I think it's definitely hard. I think, you know, once you kind of own that, and it's a choice, right, to say I'm a Native Hawaiian filmmaker, and it's part of how I identify, and part of like my goals in terms of being a storyteller is like bringing that with it. But sometimes it's baggage to people. They're like, well, this is limiting now because this is all he can do, or this is, we can only bring him certain types of stories. But, you know, I think I think the industry is always getting better. I think there's a lot of work to do. But definitely, I think there are benefits to being a Native Hawaiian storyteller. I think we're historically storytellers, and that's how we've, you know, communicated our histories and our thoughts and our fears, you know, throughout time.
For sure, yeah.
And it's a very natural extension of that. I think film and writing, it just feels like this is something we excel at. And I think that, you know, the more that we get the opportunities to do it, the better, you know. So the more I'm excited to meet people like you who are, you know, young Native Hawaiians who are trying to do the thing. And so I'm very excited to see more and more of them every day. And so once we're all like filling all of these different roles, right, and we're showrunners and executives and studio heads, it'll just become a more equitable place. But yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a great question.
Yeah, totally. I totally get that. And then like along those lines, are there any projects that you've worked on so far that you felt really had that like storytelling, like that implementation of Hawaiian culture, and just like things that you wanted to get across the most? Like, are you most proud of a certain project that really implemented that? It's
interesting. I always sort of come back to, you know, MOANA 2, and it's always going to be difficult because, you know, when you're dealing with something like Disney, you're always kind of balancing, right? What are the economics of a movie? And when you're investing hundreds of millions of dollars, how do you tell a story that is engaging, yes, but is going to make a lot of money? And I think that's what's unfortunate, is that money is a very big driving factor. But I think for us, what was so fortunate is that, you know, there was a Samoan director on the project. There was a, you know, eventually Dana Miller jumped on, who wrote and directed some as well, who's Samoan. And we had, you know, a couple of story artists who were, you know, Tongan and Samoan. So it was like we had Pacifica representation at different phases of production. And I think the most beautiful part of it was we had this Pacifica Story Trust where, you know, it wasn't strictly Hawaiian, but we had people from Polynesian Voyaging Society. You know, Nainoa came to speak to us.
Oh,
we
awesome,
had, yes, we had amazing people from Tahiti and Samoa and Solomon Islands. And so much of the production work, from how people speak, the language they used, the engineering, the you know, the way the boats looked and the way people sailed, we were able to bring in so much production design and elements from that. And again, I mean, it's always a battle, right? We're trying to like make the most authentic thing, but we're also trying to make the most interesting story. And I think, but there are ways to make those work cohesively. And I think, you know, I loved being a part of that. And I think, you know, when I see, especially kids, right? Like, you know, that's who it's for, like young people who watch it, or, you know, little girls who dress up like Moana, or, you know, my daughter is 5, and when she saw the movie, she just loves Moana, and she's like, yeah, you know, Moana looks like me. And it's funny because she kind of doesn't look like her, but for some reason she sees her.
She associates with.
Yes, and she's like, that's somebody who I resonate with. And she's like, I have the same hair as Moana. And, you know, there's something really beautiful about, even if you just see yourself on screen for the first time, it's a beautiful thing. So I'm very proud to have been a part of that.
Nice. And I really like how you mentioned that it's not just Hawaiians that were involved, and how there's different, you know, like Samoans or the Tahiti, like all that different culture from the Pacific Islands. Like, I think it's also really important that you focus on like the collaboration that can happen from all the different cultures. But
no, so much of that is, you know, we think about, we're all a bunch of islands in the Pacific, and there's vast swaths of water that separate us. But when you change your mindset and you think about, well, the ocean wasn't something that separated our people, you know, it was it was the thing that connected us all.
Yes.
And so when you realize that and you start to think about it in that kind of a Pacifica lens, you think, no, we're actually all more connected and we're much closer than we realize. And I think that's a beautiful place to tell stories from, of saying, how are we similar rather than how are we different? And so it was great being able to tell stories from that place.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And then branching off of like working on Moana 2 in comparison to other things, like I know you wrote for DOOGIE KAMEALOHA, the TV show. I was just curious if there was any major differences that you found in terms of working on a feature film versus a television, things like that. And if you, I don't know, if you preferred one of the scales more than the other or things like that. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's vastly different. I think, one of the things that I love TV. I think that's just the place to be. I love the stories that are being told on television. But I think for a writer, and, especially for a Polynesian writer, being in a TV room is the most collaborative environment you can really be in. And it's a creative collaboration. You're just hanging out, in a perfect world, you're hanging out with your friends all day and you're trying to make each other laugh and you're just telling stories. And it's like, that feels like a very fun, creative, nurturing space that you don't always get in features. It's a little different, and I think in the role of a writer is different. But I really love television, and I'm always kind of encouraging, writing films is great, but I'm always kind of encouraging especially like young native storytellers. I'm like, think about TV. I think there are a lot of avenues there. I think a lot of people watch TV. And I'm like excited to see those opportunities. Like something like A Chief of War, I feel like it's exciting. We're on the verge of seeing something that is, super native and super, the story itself is very, rooted in Hawaii. And so it's exciting to see something done like that at that scale. So I hope it's the first of many. But yeah, I think television is sort of what I prefer.
Got it. Yeah. And I think television I like how you said you have more creative control, things like that, but it's definitely something that's on the rise. So I think that for a lot of people, especially after what you just said, like a lot of people may be looking into it a little bit more in feature films, which can be looked at both ways. I guess sometimes it's hard to like see how much TV shows are sort of taking over film, things like that. But I definitely think that it's room for opportunity. And
for
things
sure.
Like that. Yeah.
Look, everything is hard.
Yeah.
And we live in a crazy time. But, I think any opportunity we can tell stories, because I think that's like our, I watch a lot of Andor recently. So I'm like on this weird Andor kick. But also I'm just like, that is our, as storytellers, that is our way to fight back a little bit, And I think, being able to tell stories over long periods of time, like through a television medium, even making films, I think it's like, it's one of the things that when you see, people in power try to cut funding to things like that, right? Because they know how powerful stories are. And so I think more than ever, we should be telling all kinds of stories.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then I guess I'm going to be asking a lot of comparison questions here, but do you think that you enjoy writing more of these like sort of for younger audience things like the DOOGIE KAMEALOHA or Moana 2 versus, I know you have Dasher, which was super funny, super fun. I love that one. That. Yeah. And do you find yourself like leaning more towards like different projects that are leaning towards that like, more fantasy things like that, or more towards, the short film that are more realistic?
No, it's a great question. I think I've been very lucky in my career to sort of be able to do a lot. I think that always made me nervous that, if you do one thing, that you'll kind of get stuck. And that hasn't been the case for me. I've actually, like, outside of DOOGIE or Moana things, I've actually never really written stuff for young audiences. I've always sort of written the things that were interesting to me, which usually skews more adult and kind of weird. And, like, Poi Dogs is such a good example. You mentioned that earlier, but it's really like a Fargo-esque, like, dark comedy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing that opened all the doors for me in a weird way. Like, even writing on family shows like DOOGIE, they saw something in the specificity of place just because it takes place in Hawaii and it's very strange. I think they were like, okay, this is someone who understands the place really well. And I think, even working on Moana, it's really only those like really weird adult samples that are kind of resonating with people. I think if you can tell stories that feel very true to the writer, like if people can read something and feel like, okay, I understand their voice and the types of stories that they're capable of telling, it kind of opens all kinds of doors. That's not really answering your question. I love it all. I think, I have kids. I have 3 kids right now, all very young. And so it's very exciting for me to be able to tell stories that they can watch. That's just not usually the kind of writing I do. So it's very exciting for me to do that. I'm very open to all kinds of stories like that. And I think more so now that I have kids, it's so cool. But, I love telling, I kind of call them like family stories, but it's not always family oriented. I like telling stories about found family or teams, things like that, like people who can come together who don't really feel like they should be together. I think so I'm really interested in things like that.
Nice. And then I know you kind of touched on this in like both of your previous answers, but I guess instead of like creative control and rather more like your voice being shown through or like you taking on a leadership role, do you think that occurs more on the feature films, the TV shows, or on those smaller independent films? Like which one do you really think that your writing showcases through the most?
It's a great question. I think, by just sort of the nature of how it works, I think TV feels like the place for that. You kind of, most of the time the showrunner is, it is the writer, the head writer. And so, writing is kind of king in that medium. And so there's something really exciting about, being on set, and there is sort of it's responsibility, but there's a freedom to make sure like the writers are the protectors of the story. And so it just makes sense to me. Like directors are amazing and we work well with them, but, being able to have a voice on set or in a writer's room and to be able to say like, hey, we understand the story and characters more than anyone because we've been spending months and months or years developing them. I think there's just something very empowering about being in television that allows you to kind of tell the stories in the way you want to tell them.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely. And then I think sort of transitioning into the state of the film industry right now, especially in Hawaii. I know you said you're in Kahalu'u right now, but you talked about moving around California a little bit. I was just curious how, the current state of it has impacted you, if you've had to like find yourself moving around more for work, things like that, or doing more like freelance things. Just curious how it's been impacting you.
No, absolutely. It's a great question. We live in the craziest time in the industry. It's been a weird 5-6 years of, we had a global pandemic that shut production down. We had, crazy, administrations that ran the country that changed sort of the taste of what types of films are being made or greenlit. We've had, horrible fires in LA that set things back. And now, there's all kinds of crazy political turmoil in LA right now. And so, I think there's always something that feels like a story killer, like, oh, this is the end of an era. And while it does feel dire often, I think like stories still prevail, and I think it's kind of like the onus is on people like us to keep doing it and pushing through. It's definitely a tough time. I think, in Hawaii, we lost all of our TV shows. I mean, it's an unfortunate reality and economic thing. Hollywood is losing their shows too. It's they just had to pass a bill to bring shows back to Hollywood, of all places, where you just sort of assume shows are being made. I think we're in a weird time, but I think it's sort of, I think, looking at the pandemic, it was sort of a crazy, it was definitely, a horrible time, but also it was an opportunity. I think the world changed because we all became much more connected through Zoom or through social media or whatever. you could live in Hawaii and work. I was working in that DOOGIE writers room while being home, being able to jump on a Zoom call and work on LA hours. So that's something that wouldn't have happened if not for the pandemic. And so, even now we're in a weird time. Things aren't being made as much, and definitely, I've been starting to do different kinds of work, but I think it's also an opportunity. It's there's always going to be a need for stories. So the more we hang in there and keep pushing, the better we'll be when things get better. Hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm glad you talked about that. And I think it's really important to recognize, like, while we are in a period that may be kind of at a halt, I like how you mentioned the Zoom, like things like that still come out of it.
Right.
That can be positive. But I guess I was just curious if you find yourself like in this time sort of chasing down projects, or do you find that this time is good for you to sort of focus in on your own projects?
It's such a great question. Yes, it's definitely still sort of, there are fewer projects that are just being brought to you, but it's an exciting time to develop. I think there are more opportunities to create your own work than ever before. I have a friend who's an amazing writer who's been working in the industry for many years, but lower level writer, but who sold a TV show at the top of the year. And that's something that's so rare, but I feel like, because of this contraction in work and in shows being greenlit, there's still people out there looking for great stories. So now's the time to, if you were ever just sort of sitting back waiting for a moment to develop something that was personal or felt like it resonated with you, I feel like now is the time to pull those out and start to write that script that you've been wanting to write forever, shoot that short film or make that project. So it's definitely a time to create.
Definitely. And I feel like, not to plug HIFF, but I think that a lot of times during this moment it can feel kind of desperate, but at the same time it's nice to see how many people are actually thinking about it. And then they start to come out, and I've seen a lot of rallies, protests happening at the Capitol that happened a month ago, I think.
Yeah.
And also just to see how, HIFF is still pushing events. People are still coming out to different screenings and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that while it may feel like a dead moment in the industry or a period of time where not a lot is happening, I think that because not a lot is happening, a lot of people are sort of recognizing that.
Yeah, for
sure. And it's bringing a lot of people out, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity, right? I mean, look, it's unfortunate that fewer people are working on big productions, but it's also an opportunity to make that dream project you always wanted to make. I just jumped in to produce. A friend of mine wrote a great short. Her name is Tara Aquino, and I work with her a lot, but it's we're just using this moment, right, to say, okay, what are the stories we've been dying to tell? And so I'm producing a short film that we're going to shoot at the end of the year. And so it's it's exciting to say, okay, we have time now. What can we do instead of trying to always chase down something? What are the things that we've been putting off because we're stuck in the rat race? And so I think there's freedom to that.
Definitely. You can definitely get ahead on things.
Absolutely.
And it gives you that, like you said, the creative freedom and time to actually, step in and do things that you may not have had time to do before.
Absolutely.
Things like that. But I guess looking forward, are there any future projects that you were looking into, or if you were maybe worried about starting any future projects during this time? Do you think that it has impacted how you've been laying out or planning what timeline you want to work on or things like that?
It's a great question. Just sort of saying again, it's an interesting time to develop. I've sort of been I sort of had it in my mind that I always wanted to, really put in the years and work my way up to trying to pitch a project.
Yeah.
But now I just find myself this year, I was pitching a feature earlier in the year. I'm developing a few TV shows right now. And so it's just this feels like a great creative time to just say, let's try to find those things that are interesting to you, or, you have some kind of connection to a story or whatever. And so there's a couple of books that I'm in the process of adapting.
Nice.
And some biopic type projects that are things that I was like always excited to do, but I thought, okay, one day I'll do them. But now it feels like, okay, there's time to do it and there's interest in it. So it feels exciting. And I think things that I had thought, okay, this is something way down the line, it sort of almost accelerated the process more than held it back.
Yeah, definitely. I totally get that. And I like to hear how it's interesting how you're also incorporating these like biopics or even adaptations of books, because as a writer, I think that gives you, it doesn't really trap you in terms of just, you know, writing for TV shows or feature films. I think it also gives you that sort of creative opportunity to do other things like that book adaptation you were talking about. But I guess, would you say that you're prioritizing more writing things, or are you trying to create things, maybe direct something, or you think you're going to stick to that writing path for now?
Yeah, I just love writing. I think, you know, I do a little producing here and there. I have directed, but it's not something I really enjoy as much. I love the creative process of kind of just not feeling held back by anything, and I can kind of just write anything. And I love, again, it comes back to like collaboration. I feel like that's just super natural to a lot of like Native people, but I think for me in particular, I love the idea of writing something and being able to hand it off. And, you know, even if you're giving up some kind of control, there's something beautiful about that. I think, you know, you mentioned Dasher. That was such a fun project, and it's, I think, something that's going to come out, you know, soon, or, you know, we're sending it to festivals and stuff, but it was definitely something that I was able to write and sort of just hand off to a director that I respect. And I enjoy that process, I think, seeing somebody adapt your work.
Yeah. So, and then speaking of process, I guess, what would you say is like your ideal writing space, your ideal situation? When do you feel most of the creative energy is flowing? Is this in your bedroom? Is it in a Starbucks?
Yes.
What's your vibe?
That is such a good question. Everyone has a different answer. I find that, look, I mean, when you're writing on a deadline and stuff, you don't have the freedom to be as picky. But in a perfect world, I would write at night. I mean, like, I'm more creative at night. I'm like not a morning person at all. So I'm always like drinking coffee constantly. I drink a ton of coffee. I need like sort of an office space. I need like some isolated area, but lately I've been like really into a nice sofa to write on. And, you know, I was like, I used to do all the things because I'm like, writing is super, super hard. Yeah. And I'm like, every excuse to make it shittier is like, I'm just going to quit. Yeah. And so like, I have a desk that like, it's standing desk or sitting, because I'm like, I have no excuses. And I have a sofa so I can like jump on a laptop. I try to eliminate all of the things that are annoying. Yeah. I need like a very noisy keyboard, and I don't know why. So I have a super loud, clacky keyboard. Yep. It needs to be super loud so that I feel like I'm accomplishing something, even if I'm not. But yeah, it's just a whole bunch of like creature comforts that I've like amassed over the years. I'm like like a drink person. So I've got like coffee and water and energy, whole lineup, like everything. Yeah. It's like, I can't, if I give myself any excuse to not write, I'll just take it. So I have to do all the things. But that's sort of a long-winded answer, but I take that very seriously. Do you write also?
I've been thinking about it. That's something that I'm sort of like looking into, and that really leads into my next question, which I guess is just, if you have any sort of advice for young students like me, if they're sort of just getting started in the industry, or, you know, don't really know what path they want to go down, I guess what sort of advice could you give to someone like that? Yeah,
it's such a great question. I wish I had like my own really cool original answer, but I always just steal from people who are way better than me. And one of them is like, I'm a huge podcast fan. That's why I'm like on this with you as well. But like Ira Glass from This American Life talks about, you know, he has a very famous quote that I will butcher, but, you know, anyone who pursues creative work, it's like you always kind of start that process of creating something, and it feels horrible. Like you're looking at it and you're like, this is shit. Why did I do this? And you have to understand that that's normal, and everyone goes through that. Yeah. And you have to write a lot of bad stuff. It's like the only remedy is that you have to keep iterating. Yeah. And I think, you know, part of it is, you feel like it's bad, but it's because you have good taste.
Yeah.
And I think you have to remind yourself that you're doing this work because your taste is good and your quality of production doesn't match your taste.
Yeah.
And the only way to get there is to keep doing it. And so, you know, when I first decided, like, in earnest, I want to be a writer, I like quit my job at the time, which I was a teacher, not a good teacher, but I was a teacher. And I was like, okay, I just started saying I'm a writer. And so I woke up every day and I wrote every day. And I wrote a lot of bad stuff. I wrote bad movies and bad TV shows and over and over and over until I wrote something that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think every person has to go through that. And I think for someone starting out, the younger you can do it, the better. I started doing that when I was like in my late 20s, and I wish I did it when I was early 20s, and I'd be maybe in a better place today. And that's one thing. And I think the other thing that really excites me is on his press tour for the new Lion King thing, Barry Jenkins has been talking about, someone asked him about like networking, or he had, you know, his advice on that. And he was like, forget networking. He's like, it's pointless. I don't think it's that pointless, but the point he was trying to make is stop trying to chase somebody that's like higher than you or some big person to be in your network. He's like, you need to look at who's around you and build together. And I think that's the most valuable thing. And in retrospect, it's something that was super true in my own life is the people I still make films with are the people I met in film programs like 15 years ago. And the some big names in TV today were people that were in fellowships with me, you know, in like 2015 or 16. And now it's exciting to see them like creating TV shows or, you know, working on really big projects. And so you start to realize like those are the people that are the most valuable, or who are you with? And, you know, you don't all have to be at a level 7. You all start at a 3 and you elevate together. And so any way you can build your network and support people around you, it's the best possible advice I could give.
Yeah. And I like how you mentioned the people that surround you, because I think a lot of people don't really think about that, or like different support groups, things like that. But I like how you mentioned that. And I like how you also mentioned different challenges and how it's not always going to be easy, I guess, to start that. But I think it's definitely important for people that are my age or younger to recognize that it's okay to start, you know, when you feel comfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
And sort of take your own route that you plan on going on. But for sure.
Just suck a little bit. Like, it's fine. Like, we all do it. I still do it. I feel like every new thing you do is slightly better. So I feel like right now I feel like I'm doing the best writing I've done in my life, and it's, you know, a year from now I'm gonna hate it and I'm gonna think it sucks. But I think like you're always sort of incrementally getting better. So I think that's just part of the process. Yeah.
Well, I think that's all for today.
Amazing.
But yeah, I really appreciate you talking to us today. It means a lot.
I'm super grateful, and good luck with what you're doing. And Colgate.
Thank you.
You're learning to make toothpaste and
basically.
Right.
Do you know how many times I've heard that?
I know. Absolutely.
It's okay.
Absolutely. I'm so sorry. But
no, our school even uses that joke. It's very on brand.
I bet.
Very
you have
on brand.
to. It was a low-hanging fruit, and I took it.
No, I appreciate it.
It was great talking to you.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Mahalo for listening to the HIFF Talks podcast. I had a great time chatting with Bryson Chun, and be sure to check out some of his work. Also, check out our socials and HIFF.org for any updates about High Film Industry Conference, as well as our festival in the fall. Mahalo.